I've definitely been in a situation where I've conducted exit interviews of people who are leaving for
Hmm.
to, go to other jobs. And remember one specifically of someone who I'd never really had an opportunity to speak to much because our areas never overlapped.
Hmm.
And but I remember I'd always really admired them from afar and like their work and what they did and how they conducted themselves. And so I was doing their exit interview, which don't get me started on whether exit interviews should happen, but whatever. Was doing their exit interview and we got chatting for like a while, which
Yeah.
was great. Very out of the norm for a standard exit interview because normally they're useless, let's be honest. But we actually got properly chatting. And I learned so many things about why they were leaving because it was due to an incredibly toxic working environment
Hmm.
that was happening where I was a
Right in front of
senior
your eyes.
member of that company in somebody else's department. So it was kind of like also very like, okay, how do I deal with this? Because stepping on people's toes is like this whole thing.
Yeah.
But I was like, how did I miss this? Like, how did I miss something that is this bad that this
Hmm.
was the reason they were leaving, right?
Yeah.
This was the reason they were leaving was because it was so bad. Um, I would have loved to have had an avenue to have found that out in a
Hmm.
different way, you
Yeah.
know, because the ship had sailed at that point. We
Yeah.
had lost some good people and we were never going to get those people back.
Hmm.
And yeah, like it was, like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
does this get, how does this go on for so long and stay so hidden? Like it's
Yeah.
really,
It's very easy to do, like as a
mm,
manager like yourself who would genuinely want the best for people and be so kind of appalled that this was going on at a company that you were a senior person at because nobody's telling you,
yeah, yeah,
and nobody wants to bring it up because it's really, really hard to report toxic behavior. Um,
yes, yeah,
because
yeah,
first of all, again, it's hard to prove. We've gone through this. It's very hard to prove. I have tried to figure out ways to do it, but unless there's processes in place that really are with the employee's best interests at heart, and the
mm,
overall company's best interests at heart. And then there's also the fear that your manager is well liked by the people above them. They have a different perception of
yes,
them.
yeah,
So if you're complaining about them, you're not going to get what you need.
yeah,
People aren't necessarily going to believe
100%.
you.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's also an issue.
Like I've seen that unfold as well,
Hmm.
where someone is a darling of senior management
Yeah.
and then, finding out that as a leader they weren't fantastic and had a lot of complaints against them.
Hmm.
Um and it is difficult to marry those two things together and also difficult to kind of leading us to our next point of like, how do you address this, right?
Hmm.
Difficult to address it going forward. Because, like I said, I actually do think that aside from your corporate psychopath persona that you talk about and have talked about, check out a recent article, people. Um, Aside from that, I genuinely do think that most people are well intentioned. Like,
Hmm.
I genuinely do think. And so it's very hard to go to someone and say, like, your behavior is harmful. How
Yes.
do we move forward with
Yeah,
this?
exactly. There needs to be a plan
Yeah,
of.
because human nature, we're naturally defensive, especially when it's not intended,
Mhm.
because we want to be able to tell people that we're not bad people, right? Nobody wants to be seen as a bad person. And if you do something that is bad behavior, it can
Hmm.
make you look like a bad person. And our human nature instinct is to be like, guys, I really promise I'm not a bad person, right?
Hmm.
That's normal. That's going to happen across everything. And so it becomes hard to address when you have to go to someone who is well intentioned.
Hmm.
They genuinely do want to do the best they can for the company, for themselves, sure, for their people, but have just like not managed to pull that off. And to
Hmm.
say to them, your behavior is actually kind of like harm. Like some people are upset, like
Yeah.
they're hurt, and like you've harmed it,
Mhm.
and as a consequence, we've maybe lost some people, and productivity's down, whatever that
Mhm.
outcome is that you're able to observe.
Yeah.
Um, and have that conversation go well because you want to give them the space to continue. You can, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes bridges get too burned and you just want to help them move on. Um, but give them the space to improve if they can, but
Hmm.
also in a way that doesn't like completely dismantle that relationship, right? Because aside from some of the most like obviously the very grievous complaints, like which I think we don't even know to go into, we all kind of know what they are. Aside from that, things like just like poor leadership and poor performance management and not addressing like toxic behaviors and rude behaviors for people, like that's addressable. Like that's addressable if you are well intentioned.
Hmm.
And we we and should give people the opportunity to redeem themselves in that, but it becomes
Hmm.
increasingly difficult to do so when their human instinct is to be like defensive about it.
Hmm.
And our human instincts, I mean, we see it with cancel culture, right? Our human instinct is to be like, you've done this bad thing, therefore you're a bad person,
Hmm.
which is harmful itself. And so I think we talk about this. Sometimes it can be very simple. The actions can seem very simple and they are, but they're uncomfortable. And sometimes it's actually very complex and nuanced, and there isn't really a clear path forward of how to address something.
Hmm.